All right, you guys have watched enough of these videos by now to know that I am a super big geek, and one of the things that is um, my favorite is basically anything space, right? Star Wars, Star Trek, um, NASA stuff. I just love learning about this kind of thing, and so we're going to talk about the space race. Is a good little bridge in between what's going to go on in this post-war period, and then on into the 1960s. So let's take a look at the space race. The space race starts on October 4th, 1957. Some of you may have seen, or if you haven't, there's a copy in the film library, the movie October Sky. That's where the movie October Sky is going to get its name. What you see in front of you is the very first man made object sent into space. It is Sputnik. Now, as you can tell from the name Sputnik, it is not an American piece of equipment. It is a Soviet piece of equipment that is going to go into outer space. This is going to be the event. It almost sounds like this would be significant, like maybe it shows up on a Coke test somewhere. This is the event that will start the space race. So the Soviets are going to launch this satellite into space, and it is going to set off this panic in the United States, but also this mad dash to catch up and then eventually pass the Soviets. So 1957 is going to be the start. The finish line of the space race is going to be the moon. So let's take a look. Sputnik didn't really do a whole lot. It was a thermometer taking some atmospheric temperatures. Spoiler alert, space is cold. Um, but it just kind of beeped. You could actually tune radios to a frequency and hear the beep. You could go out and watch it pass over top. If you were outside of a big city, you could watch it pass over top of your house if you were on the path of the orbit. But people were worried, right? What is this, right? We didn't know that's what it was doing. And so was it, was there a laser, right? Was this a Death Star? Could the Soviets take pictures of us? We didn't really know what was going on. And so people were panicked. People were also panicked because um, they thought we should have had it first, right? If somebody's going to go to space, why is the United States not leading in this technology? What it's going to lead to, kind of in the immediate aftermath, is a refocusing on math and science education in the United States. It's also going to lead to um, a program called NASA. Our president at the time, a guy named Dwight Eisenhower, is going to say, hey, we're going to bring all of this stuff together. And basically, kind of almost the same thing we see with the Manhattan Project. Let's bring all the smart people together into a room and kind of centralize our space program so we're all going the same direction. NASA's headquarters is in Houston, Texas. Right? If you've ever seen Apollo 13, Tom Hanks famously says, "Houston, we have a problem." But that's not the only place that it's located. Cape Canaveral in Florida, down by where Disney World is where our space shuttles launch from. And so that's going to be there at the Kennedy Space Center. Also in Alabama, in Huntsville, Alabama, right as you go across the border from Tennessee into Alabama. If you've ever driven down to like Destin or Panama City, you've passed it. The first rest stop, there's a huge rocket, and that's because there's a space center there in Huntsville, Alabama. It's a really cool place to go visit if you like this kind of stuff. That's going to be the headquarters of a guy named Werner von Braun. That sounds like a German name because it is a German name. We're going to bring some of the rocket scientists that were working on those V1 and V2 rockets that you may remember from our World War II visuals. We're going to bring those guys in and put them in charge of our space program. Now, nobody wanted Werner von Braun to be the guy that figured these problems out. They would much rather have been an American. He's the guy that's going to be leading the way. And so pretty quickly, the United States is going to launch our own satellite into space, Explorer 1. But there's still that feeling that we're a little behind. The other panic is this. If the Soviets have a missile that can shoot something into space, right, that takes a lot of power, if they've got one that can shoot something into space, they've got missiles that can reach the United States. What stops them from putting a nuclear warhead on one of those and sending it over? And so militarily, that's where part of the panic is going to come from as well. Now, let's look at some of the famous men who are going to go into space. If you were in class right now, I would be playing the song Rocket Man from Elton John, which is one of my favorite Elton John songs, to talk about these astronauts. Astronauts become celebrities in the 50s and 60s as they, to borrow a line from Star Trek, boldly go where no man has gone before. The first man in space is Yuri Gagarin. Yuri Gagarin orbits the Earth on April 12th, 1961. So he goes up and really just kind of comes back down, but he's a great answer to a trivia question, and I'm sure didn't have to buy any steaks for himself back in the Soviet Union. Now, you'll see across his helmet CCCP. Anytime you see those letters, that was the abbreviation for the Soviet Union in their language. So if you see a rocket or ship or astronaut with that, that means it's a cosmonaut, which is what the Soviets called their astronauts. But Yuri Gagarin becomes the first man to go into space, April 12th, 1961. Our first manned missions are called the Mercury missions. Mercury was the messenger of the gods in Greek and Roman mythology. And so these are one-man missions. So basically, these little capsules that you see were stuck on the front top of a rocket, and they would shoot them into space. The first man to go up, the American man, is Alan Shepard. And he goes up like 6 weeks after Yuri Gagarin. So we're getting closer, right? That we're trying to catch up with what had happened. Again, these guys become celebrities on the covers of magazines. They're on television shows. Everybody knew who these astronauts were. John Glenn becomes the first man to orbit the Earth. John Glenn will go up. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, which there's a copy of in the film library, you know about his journey a little bit. John Glenn will go on to be much later a senator from the state of Ohio, and he will be the oldest person to go into space. He goes on a space shuttle mission in the late 90s and early 2000s when he is in his 70s. Will go up to space again. The Gemini missions follow the Mercury missions. These are two-man missions. If you're going to get to the moon, you're going to be getting out of your space capsule. So you got to get up there and start to take spacewalks. You can see Gemini 4 here with the patch that talks about it being the first spacewalk. So it is getting out, right? Having on a suit that's going to allow you to survive in the vacuum of space and then being able to work outside and then come back in. So Gemini were the twins, if you know anything about astronomy. And so those are two-man missions. The last set that gets us to the moon are the Apollo missions. Apollo 11 is the mission that gets us to the moon. These are three-man missions. So 3 guys are going to go up in that capsule. At the top of it, there's going to be attached a lunar lander. When they get to the moon, 1 guy stays, right? He's kind of watching the car. The other 2 guys go down to the surface of the moon and perform experiments and things like that that are there. The 2 men that go to the moon first are Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Neil Armstrong has the distinction of being the first man to walk on the moon. Buzz Aldrin, though, gets Buzz Lightyear named after him. So, you know, who won that one? But these guys will be up there. They do experiments like they drop a rock and a feather in the almost zero gravity to prove a physics principle about how things fall. They actually took a golf club up with them and hit a golf ball. Later missions would take cars with them because, of course, a guy's going to want to drive around on the moon, things like that. But they're there for several hours collecting rock samples. There are moon rocks. You can actually touch one at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. It is January when I'm recording this in 2021, and so I saw that one of the decorations that our new President Joe Biden has in his office is a moon rock that sits on one of the shelves in his office. One of the things he's chosen to kind of decorate the Oval Office with, which is kind of cool. I'll put some actual Apollo 11 footage up there on the YouTube playlist so you can see. Like I said, this stuff I just think is awesome. This happens in July of 1969. It's really the responsibility or a credit to President Kennedy. Kennedy, in a speech at Rice University in the early 60s, says we're going to go to the moon by the end of the 1960s. Now, obviously, he won't survive to see it happen, and really the technology didn't exist when he said we were going to do it, but we do. By July of 1969, meet President Kennedy's goal. The guy that is president is Richard Nixon, and he will actually get to talk to the Apollo 11 astronauts as they're there on the moon. For those of you who are Big Bang Theory fans, you know that one of the things Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin will do is leave a concave mirror on the moon. And so if you've got a laser, you can actually shoot light pulses at this mirror and it will bounce back, showing you that, yes, indeed, men did land on the moon. We plant the flag on the moon. The flag looks like it's waving, even though there's no atmosphere on the moon, and it's supposed to look like that. They made it to where it was going to look that way. We go back to the moon several more times, but I think Apollo 17 is the last time, and so we haven't been back to the moon since the 1970s. So there's that cool flag. And the picture I was telling you about, July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong famously says, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." My favorite story of the space race is supposedly, too, he also says after that, "Good luck, Mr. Gorsky." When he gets back, people are supposed to have asked him about it, and he says he doesn't want to say anything. And so it becomes a mystery until the 30th anniversary of the moon landing. And somebody asked him, "What do you mean by that?" They'd spent some time in between looking at cosmonaut data. There's no Gorsky that was a cosmonaut. There's no Gorsky that works at NASA. And so he said, well, Mr. Gorsky had passed away. He thought he could tell the story. Apparently, young Neil Armstrong lived next door as he was a young man to Mr. and Mrs. Gorsky. And he accidentally hit a baseball into their backyard once. And as he goes to pick it up, he leans down underneath their bedroom window and he hears the Gorskys fighting inside. He hears Mr. Gorsky's wife yell at him and say, "Sex? You want sex? You'll get sex when the kid next door walks on the moon." What are the chances you grow up next to Neil Armstrong? Now, Mr. Rout will tell you that story is not true, and it may not be, but I choose to believe it is because it's freaking awesome. So we are there. Now, when you come back from an Apollo mission, you splash down into the ocean, right? And so this is what a splashdown looked like. They would pick the astronauts up on big ships and bring them back. They're working on this today. The capsules actually that we go to space in today have been kind of privatized. There's SpaceX. It's a company that Elon Musk owns, and there are a couple others that will send things into space. They're actually working on a capsule to take men and women up into space, and so that'll be something to keep your eye on here in the next couple of years. First female astronaut's a young lady named Sally Ride, but we've got female astronauts and male astronauts that go up today. The only nice thing you'll hear me say about Purdue University is that they have produced more astronauts than any other university. Mitchell, Indiana, actually has produced more astronauts than any other place. If you go to Spring Mill, one of the entrances to Spring Mill, there's actually a Gemini capsule, and you can go in and learn some more about Southern Indiana astronauts. When I was a kid, like I said, I was into space, and I remember in the first grade, I was in Mrs. Daly's class, and NASA was looking for a way to get people excited about space again. It had been more than a decade since we'd gone to the moon, and we now had these things that you see on your screen called space shuttles. These were reusable craft. This would go up and then it would land like a plane, and they could reuse it to go into space. And so they had a nationwide contest to send the first teacher into space. Krista McAuliffe was the young lady that won. And the idea was you could actually write in and send her experiments you wanted to do. And for the 2.5 weeks that Challenger was going to be in space, she was going to come on television and actually basically teach science from space. Well, if you know your history, the Challenger will explode shortly after liftoff. There's a malfunction in one of the pieces in the big tank that you see there underneath. And so I remember very clearly in first grade watching the shuttle launch, watching that shuttle blow up. They brought like counselors into school because imagine trying to explain to a 7 or 8 year old about the idea of death, that those people weren't coming back. I'll put a video up on the playlist for you there. It was a big time moment for President Reagan. He was very good at communicating and leading the country through that moment. Like I said, today we talk about going back to the moon because we want to use that as a base to send people to Mars. And so, probably in the last decade, people have talked more about space than they had for a long time before then. We don't actually have space shuttles anymore; those have all been retired. And like I said, we've privatized going into space. So there are companies that use those same facilities to send people into space, and so the government will pay to be able to do that. Who knows? By the time you guys have kids, or maybe your kids have grown, we'll be able to commercially travel into space, which would be really really cool to be able to do something like that. But like I said, the idea of going to Mars has been kind of the latest in in this ongoing saga of space, the final frontier, to borrow a Star Trek tagline. So hopefully enjoyed it. Like I said, I'll put some cool videos up on the playlist for you if you want to geek out about space with me. And this is also an awesome time to remember that it's always a good time to watch Star Wars. So pop in A New Hope and get excited about space like young Jason Bagwell.